we got a three-fer for you today. Three-fer. We got 3 questions that I thought were similar enough. I wanted to group them together. We'll talk about each one. 3 white belts. One is asking, what separates a good white belt from a blue belt? Because they want to know what's the thing they should be working on to get out of white belt. Another was saying, everyone tells them they should work on survival. That's always the advice white belts get, work on survival. But they think it's more fun to work on all the other stuff, passing and submissions and guard and sweeps. So could they just work on that stuff instead? Do they have to work on survival? And the last one was someone saying they're working on arm bars as a white belt, but they have trouble getting them on anyone better than a good white belt. And they want to know, should they keep working on them or should they switch to a different submission, or what should they do? So I felt these all kind of are connected ideas, things that white belts often wonder about. And so give me your hot take on them.
So white belts working on survival, and I think that gets like mistaken sometimes, because a lot of white belts are like, oh, I gotta work on survival, and they just don't engage in the guard, or just turtle. Every time their guard is like a little bit challenged, they just bowl up, grab their lapels, and hope the round is over soon. So what happens there is like they're robbing themselves of progress because they're not working on what they should be working on. So we talk about this all the time. It's like you need to put the reps, and you need to go like find your point of failure, and then figure out why you fell, and then you push forward. Now your point of failure is like farther along. So as a white belt, sometimes if you're passing guard, you're trying to pass the guard, and then you shove your arm in, and then you get triangle because you're like one arm in, one arm out. You're like, oh, that's how you get triangles. Like, oh, I'm not gonna do that again. And then you figure out like all the spots where your arms are in a position where maybe you're not putting them there, you're not shoving one arm in anymore, but you're not aware how easy it is to get triangle from that spot, right? And that's what I consider survival, is just understanding what good habits are, and like where should my arms be so I don't get arm bar? Can I, if I'm somebody's guard and I start grabbing like really high in their lapel and my arm extends, it's like, oh, I got arm bar, right? So that's also survival. It's like, where is it safe to grip? How is it safe to function without getting submitted or swept? Or if you're on the bottom, how is it safe to function without getting passed? Are all things you need to figure out, and the only way you can figure those out is just a bunch of reps.
Yeah, I think we've talked about this so much. There's this idea that if you tap less, you're doing better, especially as a white belt. When you come in and you get tapped a bunch, it feels terrible. So then you learn some things maybe that are really just stalling, but you don't get tapped as much. So in your mind, you're like, well, I went from being tapped 10 times in a round to 5 times. That's improving, but like losing slowly isn't winning. And also I think you kind of cut off some learning. Like you said, you need to go and kind of like fail a bunch of times to learn where the limits of the failure are. So it isn't just to go out there and keep making the same mistakes, but it's to go out and keep making new mistakes, ones that inform you more, and the mistakes are more meaningful, so that you aren't just going to go out there and just make no actions, in the idea being, oh, I can't make mistakes if I don't do anything, or if they can't do anything.
Yeah.
And there's also like the reality of it. As a white belt, like the question, should I work on arm bars more? Go for it, but it's really not that important for you yet, because you're probably, as you're experiencing, not able to do them. Like you're just not ending up in situations where it can happen, because you're not able to do all the other skills that are the foundation.
Yeah, like if you want to go really nerdy with this analogy, in my head, it's kind of like you're kind of like establishing how your operating system works, and then your arm bar or your pass or whatever is like apps you're launching from this operating system. So if your operating system keeps crashing because you're doing things wrong, it doesn't matter what app you're trying to use, because the underneath operating system is not in place. So if your guard doesn't function because you don't know how to hold somebody in close guard, or you don't know how to keep somebody in your open guard and like use your hooks and like have your points of contact to keep somebody in front of you and controlled, I don't care what you're working on. It can be a triangle, can be an omoplata, can be a cross choke, can be a loop choke. If you don't have the system underneath, it's not gonna matter.
The white belt's still getting the drivers installed.
Yeah, like every time you get your guard pass, it's like, oh, there's a missing driver here.
Yeah.
So that is one way to look at it. And then what is like that's the question is like what's the difference between a good white belt and a blue belt is like they have an operating system that functions. Like they know how to behave in the bottom, they know how to behave on top. So if they're passing, they know where the balance is, so they don't get knocked over with nonsense. Because that happens to white belts sometimes. Like they're like a lot of times when white belts get swept, it's not a real sweep they're getting swept with. Is they're just off balance and somebody went like this, or if they went close guard, they got knocked over that way because their balance was not there. That shouldn't happen to blue belts often.
Yeah.
Like you're gonna make mistakes, but if it's happening to you all the time, maybe you're not a blue belt.
Yeah.
And then if you're in the bottom, it's like and you're going for your attacks, your sweeps, your submissions. Is your guard working? Mm-hmm. If somebody once you open your close guard, can you get back to close guard if you want to? If you're playing open guard, can you hold somebody in open guard? If you're playing butterfly, do you know how your hooks work? Mm-hmm. So that, in my opinion, that's going to be the difference between a white belt and a blue belt. It's like they just know how to function.
Yeah, I wrote up a little list once of like things I expect out of a blue belt. Well, there's two sides of the list. There's a big list I wrote of like I expect you to know about most of these big long lists of techniques, but in the end, I don't actually care if you memorize a ton of techniques. It would be things like if I put you in each of the major positions, so close guard, mount, side control, knee on belly, rear mount, like there's probably a few other there, turtle, I guess, something like that. Top or bottom, at least you wouldn't make any huge mistakes. I mean, you wouldn't actively make a big mistake. And you would probably know 1, 2, or 3 smart, safe things to do from there. So if you're under bad positions, you're going to protect yourself and get out. And if you're in a good position, you're going to stay on top and only lose it by the opponent being better than you, not by you making just like a rookie error. And then I would expect you to just have like, in any of those situations, you have at least one solid thing you can try that you know will probably work against someone around your level, and especially work against white belts and someone coming in off the street. And that will just take time to develop. And like you said, the operating system idea, like it's a lot of little habits that don't look flashy, that often aren't even, like there aren't a thing you can teach beyond just set people up to do sparring, positional sparring, so they can build up their sense of what they're doing. You can try to teach it, but it's just like, don't lose your balance.
Yeah, and a lot of times it's just like there's like a little adjustments we make. Is like, hey, like, you know, if you step here, you're off balance. If your foot is here, you're on balance. Mm-hmm. If you're on side control, it's like this is where your knees should be. This is why your toes need to be active. This is why you need to do this, and this is why you need to do that. And then, like, you know, as people progress, it's like this habit became so ingrained that you don't think about them anymore. Mm-hmm. And then that's sometimes you have that problem with like really, really good jiu-jitsu guys that started doing jiu-jitsu very early on. They have trouble teaching their jiu-jitsu because they have all these habits that they have internalized over the years, and like now there's just like so much of a second nature to them that they have trouble verbalizing that.
Yeah, and it's funny, if you look into the sports science on it, you can actually make high-level people perform worse by making them try to explain what they're doing, and then make them do it, because they're like, it's in the automatic part of their mind and their body, so to make them pull it back up again, hey, explain this and put it into words, and they're like, struggling to do it, and you're taking it out of why they're so good at it. Yeah. They're not good at it because they can explain it super well. They're good at it because they're good at it.
Yeah, that's why sometimes instructors that were like really, they're like not the most athletic guys, and they really struggle to learn and get better at jiu-jitsu, are great at teaching because they remember the process and how they picked up all these little habits that made them good. Versus these guys that, like, you know, maybe they have a wrestling background or gymnastics or whatever, so their balance and base was so good to start with that they're like, oh yeah, you know, I just do this.
It's good at the cartwheel over this, you know, like, okay, what about the rest of us?
Yes.
All right, well, I think that tackles it for these three. Yep. So sounds like all those questions were good questions because they all come up. You're like, I want to do the cool part of jiu-jitsu. I want to do the arm bars and all those. Keep trying. But there will be things that will have to be built underneath all that before it really becomes the priority.
Yeah, so don't think about your fundamentals only as techniques. It's like, I know how to do an armbar from guard. I gotta know how to do knee cut. I gotta know how to do a mount escape. But foundations are also all the little postures and shapes you take, and like the position, where your arms are, where your feet are, where you step in.
Habits.
Your habits, like that's also part of your foundations, and that gets overlooked a ton.
All right. Hope that helps.